Hey guys, thanks for joining me for Wow Me Wednesday. As you can see, I have another guest with us today, and I feel really privileged to have Dr. Phil Trompeter joining us because he has a really different and interesting insight to share with you that we've never had on any Wow Me Wednesday video. So thanks for being here, Phil.
Well, thank you for asking.
Dr. Phil Trompeter, is a forensic psychologist and has 40 years of experience in giving witness or expert testimony on the stand when it comes to trials and in cases involving, you can explain this better than me.
Usually there's a question of whether someone has a certain mental condition and trying to address whether that mental condition affected a legal question that's before the court.
And so sometimes it could be anywhere from providing testimony on whether a police officer has used excessive use of force, right?
Exactly, sure. Sometimes I'm called by the defense or occasionally the prosecution in a criminal case where an officer is being charged with either excessive force or some kind of unlawful killing. And there are issues that the courts need to address around why were so many shots fired, or what was the officer perceiving? Why did officers respond this way to this threat? Mm-hmm. So it's their sort of mental condition applied to legal questions before the court.
And on the other side, it could be a matter of whether someone is fit to stand trial, whether they have the mental capacity to stand trial. So what Phil does is he has to talk to jurors. So in the way he communicates with them and in his words and his body language, his tone of voice, and how he reads their body language, there's a lot that goes on.
A lot.
So give us some insight into your profession and how you are able to communicate and educate the jurors, because they have some really, really important, oftentimes life and death kinds of decisions to make. So how does your communication skills come into play?
Well, most often when I'm asked to do an evaluation, I write a report, and often the questions are resolved on the basis of the report. But occasionally I have to go testify. And usually when I testify, it's in front of a jury. So you have 12 people who are trying to make a decision about usually some complex, complicated matters, that you're there to provide some expert testimony on some part of this legal issue. So, I've done an evaluation typically of someone, be it a criminal defendant or a police officer. And so I've developed an opinion after looking at all of the evidence. And then it's my job to communicate that opinion to this jury of lay people like all of you. Mm-hmm. I pay attention to certain things to try and maximize my ability to educate and inform them. And I think about a lot of things. People that know me almost always see me in a coat and tie. They may never have seen me in a sweater before. So on work days, I'm in a coat and tie. When I'm in front of a jury, I'm in a suit and tie. Because I think there's a sort of an implicit bias that we all hold about what we expect from people that are experts. And so I try to appeal to that bias.
So your professionalism is really important. And so when in this case, suit and tie, also if it comes to a job interview, you've probably heard of the phrase, dress for the job or the part that you want. In this case, it's the expert witness. You want to be credible and professional to your audience, the jurors.
Sure. I mean, I've heard of judges who ask lawyers to leave their court if they're not dressed in a tie. Wow. And to return when they have a tie on. So I know what's expected of me. Usually the only thing I believe I have any real choice over is what type of tie I wear. And I could either wear a very conservative tie or I could wear what I'm sort of used to wearing is sort of a loud, splashy, colorful tie. And I sort of make that decision based on, I think, some just sort of a tactical analysis of who I think I'm going to be testifying to.
Good things to keep in mind, yeah. Now, how about when it comes to how you decide the content of what to share with your audience? I'm sure there's a lot of legal terms, a lot of jargon that you could use, but obviously the lay people and the jury aren't going to understand that, right?
Exactly. It's one thing to testify in front of a judge who often knows the jargon or about a mental illness that might be at issue. If I'm talking to a jury or providing testimony to a jury, I always am trying to be sort of a benevolent educator without being without pontificating and without being arrogant or sort of haughty. So I take a lot of time trying to explain the various concepts that I'm talking about. If I feel like I need to use a particular diagnosis, I'll explain the symptoms of that diagnosis and not assume that the jury understands it. So I'm always very aware of the content of what I am going to be talking about, because that's really what I'm there primarily to convey. But I think I can either enhance or I can detract from the content of what I have to say if I don't say it well, and if I create distractions to people. So if I came in there not dressed in a way I think that people expect, I think the jury would find that to be distracting, and they'd have some trouble listening to me.
Right.
If I can create very few distractions so that they can really focus on the body of my testimony, then I feel like I've done a good job. So there's lots of other things I pay attention to. There's lots of research that shows, certainly for experts, but I think for anyone giving a presentation, that people will pay more attention and give more weight to what you're saying if they like you, if they find you likable, if you're warm, if you're transparent without being excessive in revealing too much or talking too much about extraneous factors. And of course, you always have to be credible. You have to be prepared. So I always try and do all of those things. And the jury has to view you as an expert, as someone who has been thorough in their assessment and has been articulate in your ability to convey your opinion and the evidence in support of your opinion.
Just like when it comes to sales oftentimes, or just getting clients for your business, they have to know, like, and trust you. So what are some examples, Phil, of how you demonstrate that likability, that credibility, and how you're able to get the jurors or the judge to trust you?
Well, I think I try to do some things that I incorporate just from my personal life. I try and make good eye contact with people, the people that I'm talking to engage them, and I believe people believe others who look them in the eye. I think there's an old adage about that, and so I pay attention to that. Any chance that I get to smile on a witness stand, I do, while being very careful not to treat a very serious matter with any kind of inappropriate humor. But almost always when I testify, an opportunity will arise where you can smile about something or make a quip about something that's not disrespectful or inappropriate. And I think that tends to humanize you, because it shows Phil the person more than Dr. Trumpeter, the stone-faced expert.
Right.
So making eye contact, I'm always very attentive to my posture. I think I believe in the adage that one cannot not communicate. Everything we do, even when we do nothing, communicates something.
I like that, yeah. That's so true.
So if I'm slouching, or if I'm tremulous, if I seem fearful, if I seem defensive when I'm cross-examined, that doesn't play well with people. So I try to avoid any defensiveness. I'm not there to win a case for someone. So if a cross-examining attorney maybe takes me down a path to something that the retaining attorney probably didn't want to have me say, if that's the truth, I'll say it. And I think all of that plays into credibility, that you're not there to win the case for anybody. You're there to be an expert scientist.
Right.
So those are some of the things.
I think one important thing that you had mentioned to me off camera before this interview, really interesting, that demonstrates the power of the pause, that works in a presentation, that works on camera, but also works in a courtroom, right? So can you tell me how you use the pause to demonstrate your credibility and also draw in the jurors?
Like that. No, usually, if you're asked questions that are really specific, there's a yes/no answer. You don't pause, you just answer the question. But you're always going to be asked a question, typically by the attorney that's retained or called you, that calls for a narrative answer. And if you think it's an important part of your presentation and your opinion. And particularly if there's a twist in the question that you didn't anticipate. I never hesitate and to sit back for a second and to go inward, not taking any more than maybe 5 or even 10 seconds, and then lean in and start giving my reply. It sounds gamey a little bit, but it's not gamey. It gives me a chance to really think it through and to really formulate how and what I want to say. And then I think the listener tends to pay more attention to it just because it becomes more dramatic.
Right. Do you see that it works?
Well, I don't know if it works. It seems like it works,
Seems
because I never really get a chance personally to debrief jurors to know, hey, that particular pause, what was that, the impact on you?
But it seems to capture their attention.
When I look up, at least maybe it's a confirmation bias, when I look up at the jury, when I start talking, it seems to me I have every eye on me.
Right. Yeah. And very similar to presentations. When you just pause, you break up the monotony of people's voices, of your own voice, talking and talking and talking. Take the time to just take a breath, think, leave the audience in suspense a little bit, and then continue on. And they're going to be sucked in, leaned in to think, what are they going to say next, right?
Right.
Thank you so much for all these insightful tips, Phil. Really, really interesting perspective that I have never gotten before. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you guys for joining me for Wow Me Wednesday. If you'd like more tips, if you want to be notified when my videos are coming out, please log on to my website, jessicachangconsulting.com, and leave me your email address. I'm working on some new things coming up, so I'd love to stay in contact with you that way. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next Wednesday.